And thank you for your patience. As you know, we were just getting Daniel, our speaker, up on the audio, but we're all up and running now. Welcome everyone to today's Open Group webinar. Today's event is being brought to us by a very active member of the organisation, Biz Design. Speaker today is D090. Before I over to Daniel, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping issues just to keep the event moving forward smoothly. First, we would encourage you to ask questions during the event. A really good opportunity to ask questions of people like Daniel. Probably the best way to submit a question directly to Daniel is to use the text QA facility. If you do write a question into that QA, could I ask you to address them to all participants? That way everyone gets to see the questions that are being asked. If you'd like to write down an observation or share a comment with a fellow attendee, now the best way to do that is via the text chat facility. Aim to answer as many questions at the end of Daniel's presentation. This presentation is also being fully recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave today's event early, or if you experience any local technical difficulties, and I'm sorry, but some people do sometimes have local audio problems, the full recording of this event will be available tomorrow, and everyone registered will get an email with the appropriate link where they can access that recording. If you do have any local audio problems, then you can always have the option of joining the teleconference, and you can see details of that under event info. There are some local numbers for countries around the world. So, Daniel, if you're ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Sure, I'm ready, and I'm really thrilled to see that so many people have logged on to this presentation. The subject today is the next step in infrastructure architecture. I'm going to try to show you today how you can apply architecture to infrastructure in such a way that you can connect with your infrastructure architecture to other domains like business and information and application architectures. And we do that by means of we call it the open infrastructure architecture method. And I will, of course, tell you a lot about that later. But you can consider it as a plugin on TOGAF. It's also fully compliant with Archimate. We used Archimate as our modeling language. So I'm going to try to show you within this hour how it works from a general perspective. And of course, I'd also to go as fast as possible so that there will be room for additional questions. My name is Daniel Jumelet. I'm from the Netherlands, and I work as a managing consultant on business and infrastructure for Biz Design. And I have several roles. This one is researcher. Since 2005, I'm doing some research and R&D work on the application of architecture to infrastructure. In 2007, that led to the publication of a book which was then called D090 and was an open infrastructure architecture method. In daily life, not only research, but what I find, we publish, and I also try to coach people in working with infrastructure and architecture, and of course I also bring it in practice as an architect myself. Well, people who are attending are already familiar with Biz Design, the company I work for. It's actually a very nice company for me to be with, because we have a broad portfolio of tools, consultancy, best practices, and training, which bring together the perfect new and innovative practices regarding infrastructure. So, for example, Architect is a tool that is being used to create architectural models, and we are currently creating the OYAM vocabulary and also the OYAM patterns that we discovered into Architect. I will do that later. And try to integrate all kinds of methods and best practices together. So we try to make a nice mix of TOGAF, Archimate, and other methods to fill the tooling kit of the architect as much as possible, because very well aware of the fact that no single method is the single answer to all the problems that we face. Okay, and also what's so very nice is that we are present in around the globe, And I see that I really appreciate that, especially from my point of view, because since I work for design, I have experienced that it's trying innovation a lot, because architecture is also a matter of culture, and being so a matter of culture, we can learn a lot from each other around the globe. So I really appreciate also have this conference with people from so many countries, because in this way we learn a lot from each other. I think I'm going now to the core content of the presentation. And well, let's start with the challenge for infrastructure architects, because I started my research in 2005. The only things that when talk about infrastructure were technical designs, and when you talk about technical designs, I have a very abstract version or form of technical design here. Well, all the time when talking about infrastructure, people are talking about boxes and wires. Because infrastructure, when you come down to break down the kind of and the type of components that are used are often boxes, platforms like server platforms, client platforms, and also wires, because we have some networking and some data transport between these boxes, and of course storage systems, which are boxes as well. So from a component and from a technical perspective, for many people, many stakeholders, it doesn't mean anything. So when you deal with infrastructure from a technical perspective, it's only meaningful to and specialists amongst each other differ from views, because if you talk to a networking professional, you get another view on the infrastructure than when you, for example, talk with an Exchange specialist or a Microsoft Server specialist. And because it's a technical domain, it's very close to the others, to the rest of the world. So it's very hard from this perspective to have alignment with the business. And when you talk about infrastructure in technical terms, well, people are not interested or are just not aware of things. For other domains, it's very hard to perceive what infrastructure is, how it of help, and how it cooperates with application components, application functions, business processes, data models, etc. There are at present no standards for technical designs, because when you see what is on the market when talking about technical designs in the infrastructure world, it's very much vendor-driven. So Microsoft does have its own standards, Cisco does have its own standards, all does have its own standards, and often they are from the perspective of the process and not the perspective of the functionality. So when trying to create an infrastructure landscape and maintain it and develop it, it's very hard from that perspective to keep it coherent, and we see a lot of times that the same functionality is implemented in several ways and in different ways, that unnecessary redundancy, which is costly of course, but also creates a lot of maintenance and administration trouble. So the result of all this, is that whether the development time is taking a very long time, because people are struggling with the requests that are relevant and translate these requirements into real solutions, or for example, infrastructure is the phase in a project which needs to be delivered very fast, and therefore delivers hasty stitch work. So, for example, a project needs some hosting. All of a sudden, the hosting capacity is put there, and it works immediately, and it's not considered well enough, and it does not integrate with other parts of the infrastructure. What's infrastructure actually? And it's important, because some people from the business tend to say that, well, why bother with infrastructure, because it's only a collection of boxes and wires, so why do we bother anyway? So I have have to look into infrastructure and the essence of infrastructure for just a few minutes. Well, maybe I think everybody knows it, but infrastructure is the foundation of IT. Without infrastructure, there will be no automation, and with no automation, most businesses will fail. So at least it's the foundation of IT. But it's an agility enabler, because if you have a flexible infrastructure, it is adaptable. You can implement new businesses and new activities and new applications more than when you have a scarce infrastructure landscape. And the last part is also important, because it's the connect point between the digital world and the real world, because infrastructure is delivering the interface between human users and digital systems. And workspace is a very important part of infrastructure that is also considered by end users to be the face of IT. So if you deliver a good working space to people, the people have a lot more confidence in the IT as a whole than when it is a crappy workspace. So the reasons why infrastructure is really important for a company, because it's not only a platform but also a lot more. Because if you see the content meta model of TOGAF, you see that infrastructure is limited to the platform that is used by applications. But for example, infrastructure delivers digital access portals. It provides all kinds of means of data storage, databases to loosely coupled file systems to really to ensure physical storage, and all kinds of replication between the things. It has communications by human beings as well as systems, and it's also the heart and the core of the information household, I think, and especially when you have a service-oriented landscape, or when you are moving towards cloud, these kind of services and these kind of infrastructure facilities become more important. You have a service-oriented architecture. Infrastructure is the thing that keeps things going. So it also delivers orchestration. And last but not least, infrastructure is also for a large part, apart from security processes, the real implementation of security enforcement is done by infrastructure facilities. So, and we all know that that from the outside world are emerging and are getting big every day. So, and it's also differing attention, because we want to have a very common and very useful infrastructure on one hand, but it also needs to be very secure. So that makes our design task even more difficult. Okay, but how to put the organization in control? Because now we have seen that it's important, but how can we align it with the business? I've seen in the window that it's one of the questions being asked. So how can we put the organization in control? I also see a Q&A question about what is infrastructure from a definition point of view, and I would say, well, I've shown you a few examples, but the definition could be that infrastructure delivers all kinds of facilities, even some sort of ecosystem, if you want to say so. All kinds of facilities that are supportive in nature. So they support other processes, other applications, other things. So infrastructure is supportive. It's a utility, a common utility that is used by many users, applications, processes, activities. I have to add something else to this definition, because in the modern IT, with also common applications like telephony or mail are also strongly being considered as infrastructure. In most companies, telephony, mail, but also messaging systems between applications are considered to be infrastructure. So maybe we cannot draw a very clear line, but one could say that infrastructure does not provide to a company by itself. It's only bringing worth to a company if it's being used by other things. So, and also compare it to landscape. You know, every landscape has facilities that are needed to make daily life possible. So you have roads, you have parking places, you have light poles. Underneath the ground, we find gas pipes, electrical lines, all kinds of communication wires. We have a source system. So in a normal landscape, we also have a lot of infrastructure that is supporting daily life, and it's supporting all kinds of usage. And that's exactly how infrastructure in a digital world works. It's like some sort of landscape planning. So, this comparison is in two ways important, because on one hand, landscapes planning means that you have to do it to enable transitions. So you have to prepare an infrastructure landscape to accommodate business changes, or for example new applications. And on the other hand, the comparison also shows that it can be a very painful process to change a landscape, because if you tear 4 houses to build a skyscraper, you have a lot of trouble. For example, you have to deal with parking space, or you have to deal with the capacity of the road or the capacity of the sewer systems. So you have to adapt the landscape before you actually introduce the large change. So you have to plan it. You have to plan infrastructure in front of other transitions. So that's very important about infrastructure architecture. You should always be one pace ahead of the rest of change. But we come into the following problem. When we talk about infrastructure with user, an end user is always end user finds it very difficult to address requirements, because an end user, when it comes down to infrastructure, is talking about appearance, and you can compare it to the car. When an end user is talking about the car, it's about how fast it goes, or how well it behaves in curves, or how it does impress women, and people are so concerned with other kinds of the functionality of the car. Maybe because that's, for most people, it's implicitly known. On the other hand, the engineer who is going to build the car is not interested in the appearance, but is interested in the construction. So he knows a lot of how things are constructed, what kind of engines are used, what kind of brakes are used, what kind of materials are being used. So as an architect, we have to reconcile these two worlds, especially in the infrastructure corner of our profession. We need to reconcile the end user with the engineer, and for that purpose, we need models. We need models to bridge the gap. Well, we can say a lot about models and theory models, but the most important thing is that, of course, a model is only presenting a view. It's actually leaving a lot of details out, and only showing the things that you want to the only things that are relevant for discussion. And when it comes down to infrastructure architecture, our main point is that when we are talking about infrastructure with all kinds of stakeholders, the main important thing we want to talk about is functionality. So, of course, maybe we will use our drawings to communicate with all of our stakeholders, but probably we use several models to communicate the functionality that we will provide by means of the infrastructure. So users are, in the end, are interested in the functionality of the infrastructure, and not so much in the construction. And I think that's the main point of our approach, that we try to address functionality of infrastructure instead of construction, and in that way make it more accessible for other stakeholders who have no technical specialism or no technical understanding, being able to have a discourse about what should be provided by the infrastructure. Well, we do that with 3 different ingredients. Of course, the vocabulary, because if you want to talk about infrastructure in a functional way, you need a vocabulary. You need to express the functionality of infrastructure. Additionally, the vocabulary being used in the infrastructure domain has a technical nature. So we had to discover and to define new terms in order to be able to discuss things in a functional way. We put because if you find words, you want to express things with these words, and they also need a grammar. So we adopted architect as the concepts and relations that were useful to address our functional infrastructure models. And last but not least, we also adapted a workflow that processes with a structured step-by-step way of working. And it was inspired by Professor Dr. Blau, who was from the Netherlands and was a very distinguished engineer by IBM, who really described his design approach, which was very helpful to us. So, well, just listen. I'm going now. For every ingredient will be checked in a little bit more detail now. First of all, the vocabulary. And I type in the slide. We start the same as I showed you earlier. So we have OEM is a result of a large community with a lot of companies involved. We started to all these infrastructure landscapes from a new perspective. So we still had these boxes and we still had those wires, but what we did do was to define the functionality that was provided by the boxes and the wires. So we say, hey, here we have a bunch of servers, and they have the role of an application engine. So they support and carry out an application. Then we have a set of boxes that are presenting the data and the information of the application, for example, by means of a web GUI to an end user, and with a presentation engine. You can also see this one form of presentation engine because you also have, for example, presentation engines that make it possible to print things on paper or have some other sort of user interface. We identified, for example, a scheduling function in every landscape. We also considered that there was application authorization service present. And when we looked into authentication and authorization, and I will show you that later in greater detail, we realized that authentication and authorization was not a single function, but that actually it was an aggregation of several functions working together. So we started to find some structures in these landscapes that were very predictable from a general point of view. So if you look to every single infrastructure landscape, you can identify the same functions, but they also all the functions have the sort of relationships between each other. So if you strip technical details from it, if you strip the construction from it, if you strip the vendors, the products from it, and you pure to functionality, every single it will start to look the same. And here, for example, data management is another function. So we made some sort of dictionary. We create a dictionary of all these words and put them into a repository. And I will also show you later in some slides from here. You will be presented with a URL to an OEM community repository which contains all these words. Also together with the effort has its own definition and its description. And not only its own description, but I will show later that also we documented these patterns. So you can use these patterns at your own disposal. The grammar. Most of you have heard of Archimate and know a bit about what Archimate is all about. And the main concepts are, of course, that the thing is that you have 3 layers: a big layer, an application layer, and a technology layer. And you also have some 3 columns, which in the middle you have the behavior, and then you have the active structure, which carries out the behavior, and also the passive structure, and that's what the behavior is carried on about. So, for example, the business layer, you have a business process that is carried by business rules, which are designated to business actors, and these business processes are carried out on business contracts, business objects, etc. On the application layer, same also technology layer. And the nice thing is that already in Archimate, you have elements that are very suitable for model infrastructure functionality, especially 2.0, because in Archimate 2.0, the function also was added to infrastructure. So you have the infrastructure service, which provides external behavior, and it's realized by internal behavior by infrastructure functions. And infrastructure functions, that concept is exactly the concept that is used by infrastructure from a functional perspective. So what actually OIAM does is providing the words, patterns, to define infrastructure functions. So it provides content it provides content that is combined with the concepts of Archimate. I think the behavior column is the column that is central to the way we model infrastructures. And of course, when the behavior is being constructed, modeled, so when the behavior is being modeled, functionality is being modeled, you can also assign active structure to it. So, for example, if you have an application engine, you can assign a node or even some system software and device to it, but the starting point is the functionality, and then you can assign the other concepts to it. So these are the core elements that we use: functions and aggregate functions. And aggregate functions are the patterns we were talking about, and they realize the services. We also use very often the requirement element from Archimate, because with that we can access specifications and requirements regarding functionality. Of course, we can use relation as a concept, for example, because the various of different functions can, in structure, the same function can be predicted in several variants because of the location it's put in. For example, if you have network access in a data center, it's completely different than network access in an office. So location can also be a very useful concept in Archimate to express thing models. In fact, can be used as an additional concept. Interface and node and communication path. These are the core concepts that we use, and the nodes are used to assign, for example, specifications for technical designers into our models. The part is the workflow, which I think for in one way, it's rocket science, because there are more methods that distinguish between functional, technical, and technical design and realization as different steps. And also within the TOGAF ADM phases like B, C, and D, you can when you carry these phases, you can also use this workflow. So starting out with functional design, then creating a technical design, and then start with realization of the design. But the thing is that there's another that you can plot on it. So not only the phases, but also the movement you make in every phase. So that if you know an archetype, it's very easy to define the way the implementation. The patterns to be found in these landscapes, you can consider those as archetypes which can be used to model the specific implementation which is needed in a specific situation. And I will show you with an example how that works. So take, for example, the archetype of an analog clock. So the function of an analog clock is indicating time, so that's the function, and it's abstract construction, dial and at least two hands. So if you to use concept in a real life situation, for example, on a train station, you can plot this concept, this archetype, in a situation you are you need to architect. And one of the main reasons for a train station clock is that all clocks are in sync. So when thinking of clocks in the context of stations, you start to discover the requirements. The main requirements will be that you are in sync, and then the architecture work starts. So how the architecture problem is, how can we provide guidelines to the technical designer in order to make sure that he does the right things to put all train station clocks in sync. And one of the specifications that we could, for example, put handouts to the technical designer could be use a very specific, very precise clockwork. It would be very expensive in a situation where you have a lot of train station clocks. So another selection could be that we have to synchronize, for example, by means of a clock network, and it means we have to synchronize it every minute. Well, in the Netherlands that's the case. So in the Netherlands, the architect has specified that every clock is synchronized by means of a clock network and a mother clock, and that every minute the are synchronized. And we can tell that the behavior of the clock because the second hand is the specification for the second hand is that the turn time is less than 1 minute. This allows the second hand to wait a couple of seconds, to wait for the signaling, the synchronization signaling, and then go on. So this is a very cheap way to keep every clock synchronized per minute. So we hand it over to the technical designer, and the technical designer also has some archetypal concepts to build clocks. He translates it into a technical design for a platform clock. Well, from the design, the actual implementation design of the platform clock, the standard components are being derived, so we can order standard products from all kinds of vendors and then construct actual platform clocks on the actual platforms. So this works very well. This workflow works very well for infrastructure, but it also works for other domains. So it also works for application, for example. The core of it is to depart from an archetype that you know already, and then translate it into an implementation that's relevant to its context. But of course, you have to know your archetypes, and that's where the concept of OEM is coming in, because you have the open architecture repository, and you can check it out for yourself because it contains about 20 patterns are the archetypes of the systems that are present within an infrastructure landscape. These patterns are being crafted and discovered by a community of infrastructure architects, most of them residing in the Netherlands, but from a lot of companies, mostly large companies. And it provides other architects a quick start for modeling. So you can use these patterns and start modeling for yourself. Another thing is that it's also these models, these generic models, are very, very well suited for requirement management approaches and inventories. I will show you later with a real-life example. Here we have an example of such archetype. So for example, we have here authentication and authorization, and within authentication and authorization, we have identity validation as a function. An identity store where identities accounts are stored together with attributes like credentials, but so for example group members and stuff like that. And this definition is also used by permission validation, and permission validation is an infrastructure function that checks if someone who needs, for example, to access a file has to do so, or someone wants to delete a file and it needs to be checked against a permission register if someone is entitled to perform that action. And why is there, for example, a relationship between the identity store and permission validation? Well, I want to carry out role-based access control or role-based permission validation, then you need a connection with the identity store functionality in order to check if someone who is claiming the right to perform a certain action is, for example, well, maybe not every person is listed in the permission register, but for example, groups are listed in the permission register, and then the permission validation function needs to check the identity store to see if the person who is claiming the act is currently and actually a member of the group that has the right mission. So this is for a small example. This is a small example for how fundamentally some infrastructure functionality and how relationships between several functions are relevant. We have distinct in our repository, and I think they cover about 95% of the infrastructure landscape. We are able to combine those patterns if needed. So very often in my architecture work, I combine file storage with raw storage, for example. That enables me to model to display this the functionality needed by the some other question about generic patterns. We focused on infrastructure, so what we have are infrastructure patterns, but of course the idea of patterns is not limited to infrastructure. You can do patterns in every area, but the most important thing is and I should go back to workflow. You need to be of the fact design level you can distinguish patterns. That's it for let's see if I can go back. Oh yeah, here we go. We have functional level, we have patterns on a technical design level, and we also have some sort of patterns on the realization level, because we have, well, for example, if you see product catalogs, every vendor has its own catalog, but catalogs between vendors are quite similar to each other, so they make sort of the same products. So even on the relation level, you see the same patterns. So, but just be aware of the level of the pattern we're talking about, and we'd always be focused on the functional patterns. Okay. Before I go to the takeaways, I would like to you a little bit and how these generics, which are also brought these models into a tool, and I have to share the tool with you. It's Busy Design Architect. It works now. I hope, yeah. So we have a repository. All the generic patterns are present. For example, application hosting. All the generic patterns that are present on in the online repository, which, by the way, is accessible, and we discover we publish under a Creative Commons license. So we make sure it remains, because it's from a community. It stays in that way. It stays it's in the possession of the community. We also saw the let's see, the identity management and authorization thing. Yeah, so here we have this model. And from this generic model, I can create now a new view. Say, for example, I want to create authorization for an action website. So at least I want to know I have validation. And here can for example, I say, what if I have an action website, what kind kind of new validation will I want to use? I can, for example, use a permission validation for a website by means of a coupon code. So in this case, I would not need the identity of the person who is acting the website. I know people need to fill in a coupon code on entry of the website, and if they have the valid coupon code, they're able to log on. So in order to validate the coupon code, I need the permission register, which holds the register codes, which holds all valid coupons, or at least the rules that are used to identify the valid coupons. So I have a use by relationship. I have to resign it. So this simple model can be enough to aggregate the authorization part of the Action website. But so we can aggregate it. To review that as well. Okay, and then I can put these boxes. So when I'm with the client, we always want to realize this Action website. The client can say, yeah, okay, this is a very good idea to check permissions of customers, but I also want to have other people log on. For example, maintenance personnel or administrators. So I also need permission validation for administrators. So we use the pattern. Say I have the permission validation function. Well, it's for administration purposes. I have the users. I need the identity store to check if an internal user is actually an administrator, and of course then I also need identity function. So if an administrator logs on, it claims to be self. So this will be used by that, and the identity store can be used to permission an administrator that he wants to perform a certain action from a role as an administrator, and I can assign it to, of course, going to finish this because it will take too much time, but I can assign this to and I can get these functions. I will just do one. All these functions to this function together, they will realize the authentication and authorization service for the Action website. So I can do that. And then realize. Okay, I hope you're with me. I will stop now. But that way, we translate these patterns. How we use this generic patterns to create specific patterns, and we use these patterns to ask questions to clients. For example, if they want to educate people, how are you doing that, and what kind of artifacts are needed for that, and stuff like that. So I cannot go into I can't go into more detail now because time is limited, but you of course then start asking customers, for example, when it comes down to identity validation, how many factor authentication is needed, 1 factor, 2 factor, things like that. What kind of artifacts are relevant for that, passwords or also tokens or certificates, things like that. So okay, then let's see how we can. I now can get to the most important takeaways. Pierre Bovin is asking what drawing application is BusyDesign Architect, and I see Janak Shah asked a question. For main steps of infrastructure architecture needs to be summarized. I think I will come to that when I finish this. So the main point here, if you want to use some of findings of OYAM together with TOGAF, you can start by using the infrastructure functions that we have defined when creating your architecture building blocks. So the patterns and the functions are very well suited to create the ABBs that are described by so at least for the D phase of the ADM cycle, you can use at least the vocabulary to be able to have a definition of the required infrastructure functionality. Of course, you can, with cycles, you can also use the verb we defined, so that we are going to our infrastructure starting from a functional perspective, and then translate into technical requirements, and from the technical requirements, select the right components, and you start to work from the architecture continuum into the solution continuum. I think it is seamlessly fitting into a TOGAF approach and provides the vocabulary and the patterns needed to create the ABBs and also do the requirements inventory that is tied to it. Then it's 100% integrated with Archimate, so you can create infrastructure models that are formulated in such a way that you can provide the services that are needed by applications. So you can define the services that are needed by applications and business processes. I will answer the question from Van soon. The thing is, the most an important point I want to make is that in order to do the architecture work, is start from functionality, because that is what stakeholders are interested in. Stakeholders are not interested in infrastructure construction. They're most not interested in the technical details of it or the vendors involved. Stakeholders, especially end users and business, are interested in infrastructure functionality than construction. So this provides a means by starting with functionality and translate it into requirements and into guidelines that steer the development of the construction and the structure part. And well, I've done research since 2005, and it took us quite a long time to do this vocabulary. But now we have it. We use it an awful lot because it provides a lot of speed by having this vocabulary, and I think that it also applies in other domains, if not already being discovered or carried out. So if you have a vocabulary that you can share within a community of, for example, business architects or information architects, it really speeds up the work of modeling. So, but of course, I'm only an infrastructure architect, so I didn't try it for other domains. A little bit I tried together with colleagues on the application level, which also worked, but we are still looking for generic vocabulary there. But it really, I think it should work well on other levels as well. So, said it's providing a workflow with structuring the design process greatly. It's providing vocabulary, and it's using Archimate as a standard grammar to models. Of course, these models are means to achieve other things. So, for example, you have the landscape overview with the several services. This overview is really a great help in infrastructure landscape planning. But of course, you can, as I showed you, you can also make its requirement analysis because you can talk with customers and with end users and with stakeholders about functionality. And be talking in terms that are understood by other stakeholders, which are not technical by nature, also provides a lot of support in the organization. And it also means that you can control over the supply side. We have seen very nice tenders where only specified functionality and then put it on an RFP, so that they were able to deliver their own technical design, and that it really was had great results because it gave some freedom on the vendor to provide the solution that the vendor believed in, and it also was very specific and clear about the functionality needed by the user, by the organization. I see also Douglas Steele, but if to find the vocabulary, you have to click on infrastructure architecture artifacts. Under building blocks, you can find the vocabulary, and under pattern types, you can the services. We have already started the work on a new repository, and in the new repository, this will be under functions and functions. We used to we started by defining building blocks and pattern types, but the thing is that in the world, the term blocks is now used for all kinds of components. So after we adopted Archimate, we decided that we should adhere more to Archimate and then use the term functions instead. In the current repository, it's still called building blocks. I see other questions, but I'm not sure if I am able to answer all of them. Well, of course, business design is just a few slides on business design and where to find the tool. Well, the tool I used was Business Design Architect. It can be downloaded from the businessdesign.com website. You can download a free trial if you like. No questions about that. If you go to www.businessdesign.com, you'll be able to download the tool to check it off. Of course, and organizations to workshops and consulting services to put it into practice in your own organization, and to try the talk of Archimate, OYAM, and other approaches. And of course, well, some training as well. And I will put into, well, I think when I'm answering some questions, I will put this slide in front of you, so that you have some URLs that you can check out, and I can see if I'm going to check if I can some other questions. I see a question of Victor Maduro. How do you map ABB and SBB? Well, I think the ABB can be mapped on the functional phase, which showed in the workflow. SBB will be more the domain of the technical design. So you can see that the ABB, what we create ABBs by means of OYAM, and then it's possible, for example, to assign it to a node, and the node, being more specific, modeled more specific by means of system software or devices, is the bridge between the ABB and the SBB. So if I go back to the model, which I said I'm not sure if I have to share it again. I hope, yeah, it's being shared now. For example, I can assign a node, let's say internal users are being I can create nodes, and I still have the application in Dutch because it's also the application can also be easily turned into English. Let's say, for example, this is Microsoft Active Directory or maybe a directory, and I can assign this node to function. I think this is a bridge to your SVB, and you can even put some system software to it. Directory. And I tend to use the aggregation relation. I prefer it over the composition relation because in infrastructure you want to use some components at several places in your modeling package. So a composite relationship would be strong to do so. And I think, well, actually the ABB or part of the ABB, and this is the bridge between ABB and SBB, and starting point for where you can create a slew building block from. So I hope that answered that question, and I'm going to stop sharing. I've seen of Rebecca and other complex questions also from Venkat of how to frame on ITIL, and also I do not even know all the acronyms, so it's very hard for me to answer some of those. Well, ITIL of course is more an infra operations framework, and it does have the service design thing. I guess that is something that can be used. Well, ITIL is so specific on where architecture sits, but if you want to combine ITIL, I should say that architecture and infrastructure architecture matches with the service design and the service design activity that is being plotted in ITIL. Of course, with infrastructure architecture, we can also help out with problem management because making use of the patterns, we can also easily locate interdependencies between infrastructure functions, and by that we also help tremendously with a root cause analysis exercise. So and support problem management. It's also a process in ITIL by means of architecture, but of course you cannot support every ITIL process with architecture, because architecture, I think, and it's my opinion, is mainly focusing on changing the infra landscape or changing the IT landscape. I'm not sure about IC, BIMS, GIS and CAD application. Sorry if I can answer that question. I do not know the SID model well. The thing is, what you check is with every infrastructure model, what you need to know is what you need to decide for yourself and to analyze on what abstraction level or on what level is the framework pointing? Is it a functional level? Is it a technical level? Because many infrastructure frameworks I know are defining things on a technical level, and the difference with OYAM is that OYAM tries to provide the framework, provide the vocabulary on a functional level. So, and of course, in that way, it's only complementary, because we will need both. In the functional design phase, we need the functional vocabulary. In the tool design phase, we will need technical vocabulary. And when design phase, we can use a vendor agnostic framework. It's great, because then we are also independent from the vendors who use also for technical components, use their own terms standards. So I think those frameworks bind very well. Okay, I've left several questions unanswered, but it's 6 o'clock. And Simon?
Yeah, Neil, thanks for that. Yes, you've noticed that we've come to the end of our allotted hour. And thanks for answering all those questions at the end. I'm sure, Daniel, you'll agree, if there's any questions that haven't been answered yet, I'm sure you'd quite happily take them offline, Daniel.
And that's why I put the last slide permanently in the picture.
That's
so my email address is listed. Also my mobile phone. I don't bother getting calls from people. I sometimes prefer calls over lengthy emails, because a call can be even more quick to address some questions than lengthy emails. So people can feel free to contact me.
That's great. Well, Daniel, I'd like to thank you for your time today and your presentation. That was excellent. I would thank everyone for attending today, and I would encourage you to keep an eye out on the Open Group website for the webinar schedule page. I've got another 3, I think, already scheduled for the rest of this year. So once again, Daniel, thanks for your time. Thank you, everyone. I think this is a good time just to bring today's event to a close. Thanks very much.
Okay, and it was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.